Hello everyone, this is Dr. Vishal Trivedi from Department of Biosciences and Bioengineering, IIT Guwahati. And what we were discussing about the origin of life and its appearance onto the earth. And what we have said is that life is originated onto the earth in the form of a primitive cell, and that primitive cell is developed into the highly organized organisms, either they are belonging to the invertebrate organism or to the vertebrate organisms. In the case of plants also we have discussed about the different types of plants, whether it is the very simple algae or very complicated angiosperms. In the previous lecture or in this particular module, what we were also discussing about the evolutions and how the very simple organism is getting evolved into a very complicated and the advanced organisms. We have put many type of evidences. We have put the evidences in terms of the morphological or the structural evidences, or we have put the embryological or the paleontological evidence. And by giving these evidences, people have put forward the idea that the evolution was happening, and because the evolution, a simple organism is getting evolved into a very complex and advanced organisms. In the previous lecture, we discussed about the different types of theories. We said that there are three theories what people have put forward: the theory of inheritance of the acquired characters, the theory of natural selection, and the Hugo-Dewey's theories or the mutations theories. In the previous lecture, we discussed about the theory of acquired characters given by the Lamarck, and we have discussed how there are many points which are being proposed by the Lamarck, like the use and disuse of the organs, or the natural needs, or the theory of acquired characters, and so on. All these things are being disproved because there are huge criticism of the theory by giving the different types of evidences, and ultimately the Weismann's experiments and as well as the Weismann theories, where it is saying that the acquired character cannot be inherited from one generation to another generations. The modification what is happening into the germ cells, those are only going to be inherited. And based on these observations, the scientists have also modified the Lamarck theory, and they come up with the idea of neo-Lamarckism. But the neo-Lamarckism also could not be able to explain many observations, and that's how people were looking for a better theory, and people were looking for an advanced theory, so which actually can be very broad. It could be actually based on the experimental evidences, or it could be based on the some kind of population study, or some kind of more broader studies. So they were looking for a theory which was based on the experimental evidences. In that context, there are three scientists which could come together, and that's how they have proposed the theory of natural selections. So the theory of natural selection was proposed by the two scientists. One is called as the Charles Darwin, and the other one is called as the Alfred Russel Wallace. So this is the Charles Darwin and this is the Wallace. In their common publications, both of them conducted scientific data collections from the individual population survey. So what they have done is they have collected the data from the population survey. In fact, the Charles Darwin traveled for 5-year expedition around the world onto a ship which is called as the HMS Beagle. And HMS Beagle is a famous ship which Charles Darwin has used to run around the world, and that's how he has collected the different types of animals. Like he has collected the pigeons, he has collected the other animals like birds, and he has studied those animals, and that's how he come up with the idea of theory of natural selections. During this journey, he made observation of the several animals and plants. He keenly observed the similarity among the organism and draw the evolutionary relationship. In addition, they also got the help from the economist Thomas Malthus. The report on the workers recognized the competition between the species leads to the struggle for the existence. So this is the Thomas Malthus, and this is the famous ship which is called as the HMS Beagle. Considering the Wallace view and the Malthus observation of the worker led the Charles Darwin to propose the theory of natural selection in its very famous book which is called as The Origin of a Species. And Origin of a Species was so famous that it actually was the best selling book on that particular year. In fact, the number of copies what are being sold for The Origin of a Species were much more than the number of copies which people are buying for the Bible also. So that's how it says that the theory of natural selection what is being proposed by the Darwin was actually being very interesting and exciting to explain the evolutions. So let's see what are the assumptions what Darwin has made. The theory of natural selections is based on the following point. The first point is the rapid multiplication. So what Darwin says that every organism has the enormous ability to reproduce, to continue its species, right? All animals and plants tend to multiply in geometrical progression. For example, an organism will be doubled in first year, 4 times in second year, and 8 times in a third year, and so on. So this means the production is actually on a geometrical progressions, right? So you can, if you start even with the one organism, it is going to be double, right, within 1 year, right, or after the first generation. Then it is going to be 4, then it is going to be 8, then it is going to be 16. So this is when you started with the single plant. Like if you started with single plant, it will become 16 plant in 4 generations. So let's see the examples of the organism to understand the potential of the organism to multiply. These examples are as follows. So we have a first example of parameciums. In its multiplication rate of 3 times in 48 hours, which means in 2 days it is actually going to be get tripled. So if the single paramecium will allow to grow and multiply in 5 years, it will give a mass equal to the 10,000 times to the size of the earth, which means if you allow a paramecium which is actually going to be multiplied 3 times in 48 hours, a single paramecium will grow and multiply. If you allow the grow and multiply for 5 years, it will actually going to give you the total mass which is equivalent to the 10,000 times to the size of the earth. Then we have fish. So if you have the cod fish produces 1 million eggs in a year. If all these eggs will give rise to the fishes, the whole Atlantic Ocean will be filled in 5 years. You can actually calculate how many fishes are going to be produced if you allow these, and all these, million fishes are also going to produce. So if you try to calculate, it is going to be very huge number. Similarly, we have the oysters. An oyster may lay these many eggs at a single spanning. But if all the oysters grow and survive up to the adulthood for 5 generations, then the number of oysters will more than the number of electrons into the universe. Similarly, even if for the bigger animals like the elephant has an average lifespan of 90 years, and during the whole lifespan he can produce only 6 offsprings. So even it is a big animal, it has its production rate is very low, which means a single elephant is actually going to give you the 6 offsprings. Okay, if all the offspring survived, and single elephant pair would produce this many elephants in 750 years. This means even if the bigger animals like elephant, if you allow them to grow for the reproduction, they will be going to be very high number. The plants also, plant produces thousands of seeds every year. So every organism. The point what the Darwin was putting an emphasis is that every organism has the enormous ability to produce, to maintain its species. But you know that the number of these species or their number is also not very high, right? They will remain under constant. So how it is so? It is so because you have the limited natural resources. In spite the enormous capacity of an organism to reproduce, the number of individual species remain constant. You don't see the elephants everywhere, right? You see few elephants, but you don't see that number what we have just discussed, right? It is happening, it is because there is a there's a limited natural resources. All the elephants require the food, they require water, they require oxygen and so on. And it is due to the increase in population in animal or plant require more space and food. And ultimately the food to the plant or animal is provided by the carbon dioxide from the air, water and mineral from the soil. So the amount of these basic material is limited in universe, right? You have a limited natural resources. You have a limited number of water, you have a limited amount of oxygen, you have a limited amount of carbon dioxide, and even the sunlight is also limited, right? So hence it does not allow the population of the organism grow beyond the limit and an equilibrium is reached, right? An equilibrium is reached where you have the production of few organisms and then you have the death of the same organism. So because of that there is a complete balance. How that balance is happening? That balance is happening because there is a struggle for the existence. Due to the shortage of the food, water and space, there is a severe competition among the offspring for the existence. For example, if you start with the elephant has produced the 6 offspring. All these six offsprings actually require the one thing, right? They require the food, they require water and they require the space. So if all the 6 are requiring the same thing, they will actually going to fight with each other for all these natural resources, and because of that some of the offsprings are actually going to get the food, some of the offsprings are not going to get the food. So every individual has a few basic requirements such as the food, space, water. They are also looking for their partners, right, so that they can be able to reproduce, and then they also require the protection from the enemy. And if anything goes wrong, for example, if they could not get the food or space or water, or they could not get a space to hide so that they can get protected from the animal, that is actually going to end their life. So because of this there will be a competition, and because of that all the 6 are not going to survive, right? There could be some of the offspring which are going to die. Same is true for this elephant also. This elephant also could die in due course, right? Because it may not be able to get the food, water or space, or it cannot get the protection from the enemy as well. So in order to achieve basic need, the organism compete with each other, and it is known as the struggle for the existence. The struggle for an individual can be of 3 types. So you can have the 3 different types of struggles. What is the struggle? Struggle is intraspecific struggles. The competition of the individual of the same species is called as the intraspecific struggles. For example, the fight between the 2 dogs for a piece of meat. War is another example of intraspecific struggles among the different humans, right? So what you might have seen the fight between the 2 dogs, right, for a piece of meat. You might have seen around the butcher's shop there is a a lot of dogs which are sitting and waiting for their piece to get. But as soon as he throws the piece of meat, there are multiple dogs which fight for that particular piece of meat. So who will get it? That is going to be the winner. So winner is actually going to get the ability to survive, whereas the losers are actually going to not get the food for a very long time, and that's how they are actually going to die. Then we have the interspecific struggle, the competition of the individual of the different species, which means if you have a bird, and if you have the frog, for example, or suppose you have the snake, right? So in that case the frog is actually going to require a protection from the snake, right? It has to have the ability so that it can actually take up the food and nutrition and all that thing, and it also could get the protection from the snake. Same is that snake also should get protection from the bird. So that's how, if the struggle or the competition among the individual of the different species, for example, the tiger attacks on the deer for the food, right? So tiger should attack onto the deer to gain the food. Deer should get protected from the tiger, then only it can be able to survive. So that competition is called as the interspecific struggles. And then the third is the environmental struggles. So every individual struggle against the change in the environment, such as change in the temperature, humidity, level of water, rain and climate, etc. So these three kind of different types of changes could actually be responsible for the struggle of the existence. And once you struggle, you are actually going to change yourself, right? You are going to be intelligent, then only you can get protected. For example, the deer, right? Deer has to adopt the new and new schemes, a new and new way, so that it could get hide from the tiger. Similarly, the frog should actually be able to intelligent enough so that it would hide into the some bushes or some deeper places, so that it should not get caught by the snake. Same is true for the snake also. Snake should also have the better and better abilities so that it could be able to catch the frog, and then only it can actually be able to get the food. So if you actually keep developing these kind of strategies, you are actually going to keep varying yourself from your offspring, from your other partner, other members of that particular species. And because of that, there will be a variation. So there will be a variation. Each and every individual varies in several aspects from the other individuals. Like just now we have discussed, right? A frog who has to survive from the snake will probably going to change many things. It may change the skin color, it may change the size, it may change the some of the other kinds of features, and that's how it actually is going to be a very different from its other individuals. Even the offspring produced by the parents also differ in their aspects. The two individuals can be different from each other in their behavior, color, size and strength, right? You might have seen, right, when you and your brother or your sister may not be identical, right? They are different from each other from the beginning itself. They are different from each other from the by birth, right? They are different in terms of their intelligence. They are different in terms of their different type of skills. Your sister could be very good in terms of drawing, your brother could be very good in cricketing, you might be very good in hockey and so on. So that kind of that kind of behaviors and that kind of changes are happening from the birth itself, right? And that could by training and by these struggles, you are actually improving those abilities. And then there will be a natural selections. So due to the variation among the different individuals, they struggle toward their existence for different potentials. For example, there could be two individuals. There could be two individual A, individual B. This guy is not good, right? So if you have two different types of frogs, and if this guy is not very good from getting the protection from the snake, this guy is going to be killed in due course, whereas this guy is going to survive. And that's how the lineage of this B guy's lineage is actually going to continue, whereas the A guy's lineage is actually going to remove from the information. So that's how this A is actually going to be a new species, the B is another going to be a new species. The variation in an individual may allow him to survive and complete its life cycle comfortably. Whereas if the variations are unfavorable, the individual will struggle against every odd, and as a result it may not be able to complete its life cycle. For example, fast running deer has better chance of escaping from the tiger compared to the slow runner. This is another example, right? You have two deers, one is so you have two deers, right? Deer 1, deer 2. This deer is very fast, right? So he will, whenever the tiger will come, he will run away. Whereas this one is slow, right? So whenever the tiger will come, he will actually catch this deer. So this means the population of the B will go down, whereas the population of A will go up. And that's how the deer 1 is actually going to capture that particular place. Another factor is the ability to adapt into the change environment. Both Darwin and Wallace recognize the environment as the principal factor for the natural selections. So there are many times when you are even very powerful, you are very strong, but you cannot be able to adapt due to the change environment. One of the classical example is the dinosaur, right? Dinosaur, as per the latest theory, they were cold-blooded animal, right? They were cold-blooded animals. What is meant by the cold-blooded animal? Cold-blooded animals are the animal which cannot regulate their body temperature. Okay, regulate body temperature, which means they will adopt the same temperature of the environment. So they will not be able to regulate the body temperature. For example, humans are not cold blooded animals, they are the other kind of animal, right? They could not be able to regulate the body temperature. So if there will be cold, they will actually going to feel the cold. If there will be hot, they are actually going to feel the hot. So because of this kind of variations, dinosaur could not be able to adapt to these changed environment. If there will be a low temperature, they will not be able to survive because they cannot regulate the body temperature, and that's how the dinosaur could not be able to survive, and they will be get vanished, or they will be get extincted. For example, the ant plants with ability to hold more water and can be able to reduce the loss of water will ultimately survive despite the physical strength, height and the other characters. So this is another example. If you have a plant which actually can have the ability to hold more water and can be able to reduce loss of water. For example, you have a plant like cactus, right? So cactus survive even in a hot weather because cactus is converting its leaves into spine, right? You might have seen, right? Cactus with the spine. These spines are nothing but they are modified leaves. Now these, if you change the leaf to a spine, what you're doing is you are actually reducing the loss of water, because the leaf is actually leaving the water from the stomata, right? So if there will be a loss of water from the leaf, that is actually a problem. But when you convert these leaves into a spine, because a leaf, you know, you have seen, right? Leaf is very big, right? So that has a very large surface area, and because of that, the evaporation is going to be fast. Whereas when you convert that leaf into a spine, the surface area is going to be reduced, and because of that, it is actually going to reduce the evaporation. So that's how these are the modifications. Any plant who will do this kind of modification is actually going to survive into a hard and the low water area, whereas the other plants are actually going to die. Another example we have discussed about the dinosaur as well. Now, once you have these kind of thing, then you have to have an inheritance of the useful variations. The individual survives due to unique variations, mate and produce of their offspring to complete their life cycle. As a result, they transfer the useful variation to the next generation and allow the individual to multiply. Darwin believed that any variation which can help the individual to survive and help to favorable for struggle will be inherited. It considered the variation which may be acquired or to the inheritable. For example, just now we discussed, right, if the elephant or frog, for example, if the frog has to hide from the snake, it suppose you have two different types of frog, right? Frog number one, frog number two. This frog has changed its skin color, right? It has the ability to change its skin color, whereas it cannot. So this means this guy is not going to survive, whereas this guy is going to survive. And if it survives, it is actually going to mate to the another individual, and that's how the number of this particular frog will go up, right? And that's how it is actually going to be present in the environment. And if it is present in the environment, it is actually going to form a new species. So as a result of struggle and natural selection, only the individual fits to the environmental condition will survive and complete its life cycle. As a result, the number of these individuals will increase over the course of time compared to the less favorable organisms. In addition, the variation favoring will be inherited to the next generation, whereas unfavorable variation will be discarded. Due to continuous selection, a new organism will appear which will be different from their ancestral form. This means if you started with a frog which cannot change its skin color, you might have one frog which actually can change the skin color. There will be another frog which is normal, right? So you have normal frog, you have the frog which can actually be able to change its skin color. So if it can be able to change the skin color, it can get disappeared into the bushes, it can disappear into the green grass, right? And that's how it cannot be get caught by the snake. Now this guy is actually going to caught, right? So if this guy will actually going to be keep reproducing, and So another generation also, again the same thing is going to happen. It is going to produce the two different types of frog. It may produce the frog which will not be able to change the skin, but it will actually going to produce the frog which is actually going to be change the skin. So this frog again will survive, and if this will continue for several generations, what will happen is this is actually going to be evolved as a separate species. It will get changed from the frog, not only in terms of skin color, it may also acquire the different types of additional characters. So these good variations are actually going to be get selected by the nature, and these good selections are eventually will form a new species. So we'll say, oh, there is a new frog. The frogs could be which can change its skin color, or it can actually make the skin so slippery that the the snake cannot be able to catch him, and all other kinds of characters. So because of that, it is actually going to form the new species. And that's how the Darwin has explained the development, the production or the generation of the new species. So let's understand this by a classical example of the giraffe. So what the Darwin has proposed, its theory on these points. One is the rapid multiplications, then you have the natural selections, then you have the struggle for the existence, then you have the variation, then you have the natural selections, and then you have the inheritance of the useful variations, and then you have the formation of new species. Now see here. So what Darwin has said is that you have the two different types of giraffes. You have a giraffe which was look like as deer. So you have the giraffe which was deer like giraffe, and there was a giraffe which was a natural giraffe, what we could see nowadays. This is the giraffe and this is the deer like giraffe. So this deer like giraffe, when it was present into the environment, so initially there was a grass, so both of these species were surviving. But then there was a scarcity of grass and the leaves were only available onto the trees. So when the leaves were only available on the tree, this particular deer like giraffe could not be able to get the nutrition because his neck was small, right? So he cannot reach to these trees. So because of that, they actually start dying, and this guy was only surviving. And this guy was surviving, so he started mating with the another giraffe, and that's how their number is increasing, and that's how we could be able to see a new species. So this is what is written here, that you have the two different types of giraffe present onto the deer like short height and the long leg and the forelimb, right, which is the current giraffe what you see. So until the grass was available on the land, both of these species were surviving and be able to compete with their life cycle. With change in the climate and reduction of the grass, there might be a struggle for the food, right? So that was it said, right? There will be a scarcity of the natural resources, which means in this case there will be a scarcity of grass. Then there will be a struggle, right? Because some guy could not get the food. So the giraffe with long neck and the forearms can still be able to eat the leaves from the tree, but the deer-like giraffe could not be able to reach there and died due to the starvation. In the due course, the several rounds of the natural selection led to the giraffe with the long neck and the forearms dominated the region and be present as a new species. So that's how the Darwin has explained the generation of the giraffe what we see in the present time. There are other examples also. There are other example is the natural artificial selections. From ancient time, the man is selecting good breed animals and plant for their use. In addition, they are performing the crossbreeding of these species to develop the newer breed with a desirable character. The scientists supporting the Darwin's theory explained the evolution through the natural selection to give rise to the new species, just like following similar mechanism as the artificial selection by the man. They further added that the natural selection is a slow process but much more complex compared to the artificial selection. For example, you can see these are the sheep, right? So the people were developing the sheep which was having a low height, right? So if they are having a low height, they cannot be able to run away from their barricades, and that's how they would be preferred, right? Then we have the mimicry and the protective coloration. The mimicry and the protective coloration is a very common in several organisms as the product of the natural selection. Most of these organisms acquire the pattern of coloration by gradually changing the color at each stage. So that was also another example which says that because of the forced conditions, because of the conditions which are forcing them, you have to change the conditions. Then you have the correlation of the nectarines and the proboscis. The position of the nectarine and proboscis and insects correlate as well and match well to the facilitate pollination. This relation does not develop in single days but eventually gradually emerges through the process of natural selections. So you know that the nectarines are containing the food, right? It contains the food for the insects, right? And that's why you have a very set pair of flowers, you have a very set pair of insects, and this proboscis and the nectarines combination is matching with each other, and that does not happen in the single day. It happens because there is a natural selection. These insects are only going to come and take the nutrition or the food, the nectar from these nectarines, and that's how they will be only going to do the pollination for these plants. So these are the few examples, but these examples are not enough because the people were coming up with the different types of objections. So there were objections against the theory of natural selection as well. What are these evidences? The evidences, one evidence is the perpetuation of the vestigial organs. We know that the vestigial organ, the organs which are non-functional, but they are still be present in the new generations. Those are called as the vestigial organs. Their classical example is the wisdom teeth in the case of the human, right? So you have a wisdom teeth which is considered to be a vestigial organ. Or there are other things also, right? You have the caudal tail and something like that. So vestigial organs are selected despite the fact they are not useful for animal, but even then they are preserved generation over generation. So you know that we all have the different types of vestigial organs. Then there is no explanation for the variation. Darwin could not be able to explain the source and the mechanism of variation in the organism. So he could not be able to explain why there could be a variation, what is the mechanism of the variation. So he's still having the same kind of issue what Lamarck was having, right? Lamarck could not be able to even explain how the acquired character will be inherited, how the acquired character will go into the germ cells, and same kind of problem was there for the Darwin also. Then the distinction between the continuous and the discontinuous variations. So according to the theory, Darwin assumed that any variation essential for the animal survival will be carried forward to the next generation. We know that it is not true, and as per the current knowledge of the genetics, right? So any character which you are acquired for your own existence will not be going to go into the next generations. Then we have the disapproval of the pangenesis theory of Darwin. So Darwin put forward the theory of pangenesis to explain the process of inheritance. It was disapproved by the experiment performed by the August Weismann in the 1892, right? So these are the few objections what people have put forward against the theory of natural selections. And so that's why the people have looking for some of the explanation. They were looking for the explanation for the variation, and then they will be also looking for what are different characters which are actually going to be carried forward from the single generation to the next generation. To explain those phenomena, the Hugo de Vries actually proposed the new theory, and that theory is called as the mutation theory or the Hugo de Vries theories. So what the Hugo de Vries theory is that the theory of Lamarck or the Darwin is based on the population study, but both theory could not be explain the origin of the variation and their mode of transmission from the one generation to the next generation. So that was the major objection what was there in both the theories, the Lamarck theory or the Darwin theory, that they could not be able to explain the origin of the variation and as well as their mode of transmission from the one generation to the next generation. To understand the gap, the Dutch botanist Hugo de Vries actually has put forward the mutation theory in the 1901. And according to the de Vries, mutation theory states that the new species arise from the pre-existing ones in a single generation by the sudden disappearance of the new feature through a genetic variation known as the mutations. So what he said is that evolution is not a slow process. It happens all of a sudden. Because of some kind of environmental changes, it actually causes a mutation into the germ plasm, and because of that it actually allows the appearance of the new species. So contrast to the earlier theories, whether it is a Lamarck theory or the Darwin theory, De Vries proposed that the evolution is a sudden, discontinuous and jerky process rather than the continuous and the gradual process. He termed the process as selection, that is a single step large mutations. In addition, the natural selection works on the mutation, preserve the mutation found useful and eliminate the mutations with the harmful mutations. But he did not support the struggle between the organism, considered the coexistence of them with a parent species. So what the Hugo de Vries normally said is that if you have a cell, okay, then all of a sudden there will be a mutation. So what will happen is its genome is actually going to get mutated, and that's how you are actually going to have the two different types of cell, right? One which is having the original cell, the other one is actually going to have the changed mutated one. So this mutated one is actually going to survive if these mutations are helping this particular organism to grow. But if it is not, then it is actually going to will not allow the this particular organism to replicate or go further, and that's how it is actually going to die. So what he said is that the mutations which are useful are actually going to be preserved, whereas the mutations which are actually going to be harmful for the organism, they are actually going to be eliminated. He did several experiments to prove that. So what are the experiments? To test the proposed mechanism, Hugo de Vries conducted the experiment on the plant called as the evening primrose or the Orianthara lemicana. Okay. He observed the subtle but the significant change between the different wildlife varieties. So what he has done is he has taken the evening primrose plant and then he actually breed them. Okay, and once he done the breeding, like the self pollinations, after that he got the seeds and then he started growing them. So what happened is you could found that the majority of the plants are giving the normal plants, but there were some plant which were actually having the different plants, right? So different, he was getting the different plants. Even if it is getting the different plant, which is actually he is termed as the mutant plant, even if due to the self pollinations, right, you are going to get the different plants, like you are going to get some different plants and you are going to get the more different plants. So this means in every generation, what it says is that if you do even the self pollinations, in every generation there will be a normal plants and then there will be a mutant plant. For example, if you go to the second generation, again there will be a normal plant or the different plants, whereas in the mutated plant. So this will continue, and any mutant which is allowing the survival will actually going to propagate. Any mutant which is actually going to be lethal, it is actually going to does not allow the running of that particular mutant. So what he said is that he found that the mutations appeared suddenly and were inherited by the offsprings, and De Vries find the four different types of plants. Progressive, which means the plant with the new traits. Retroprogressive, which means that has reduced or lost the traits compared to the plant, which means it has gone to the one generation back. Then it has a digressive, so plant with the weak or the low survival, and then it got the inconstant. These plants are unstable and they resemble the parents as well as at times they produce the variations. So you are getting the four different types of plants: progressive, retroprogressive, deprogressive and inconsistent. So important conclusions from the De Vries mutation theory are as follows. So based on that experiment, he has actually made the conclusions. What are the conclusions? The mutations are the initial factor for the evolutions. Then the mutants are non-predictable, occur suddenly and produce their effect instantly. So there is no delay in evolution. That is a major point from the Hugo de Vries the theory of mutations, which means it says that the mutants are non-predictable, they occur suddenly and they produce their effect within the next generations. So within the single generation, you would be able to see a change phenotype. So no intermediate stage between the appearance of the mutant form and the parent plants. Then the mutations are cumulative in nature and occurs on the multiple occasion to increase the frequency of mutation into the populations. So mutations which are useful, which are good, they are actually going to be accumulate even if that is happening onto the multiple occasions, and that will increase the frequency of these mutants, the mutated organism into the populations, because the mutation is making the organism more strong, right? So the strong mutation is going to be accumulated in the populations. A single mutation may give rise to the new species. And at last, the environmental factor works as a selection pressure to allow the growth of the beneficial mutant and eliminate the leader or the non-useful mutation. So what it says is that you start with the parents and there will be a mutation, right? After the mutations, you are going to have the multiple types of offsprings, right? And all these offsprings are actually going to face the environment. Once they will change the environment, this is going to be like, for example, if you have 4 different types of mutations, all these 1 2 3 4 are going to face the environmental conditions, and those who are going to survive the environmental conditions, for example, the mutation number 1 is going to survive, that is actually going to result into the formation of the new species. This is what he has done, right? If you start with the parents, okay, you are going to do the self pollinations, then you are going to produce the offsprings, right? So the mutation are actually going to create the variations. You see that this is the wild type, this is the mutant number 1, and this is the mutant number 2. Because this mutant, the mutant 0, is actually not good, right? Because the unfavorable mutations will actually going to select against. So if there will be unfavorable mutation, it is actually going to not going to survive. So there will be no survival. Whereas these two mutants are actually going to be selected, and again they will go with another round of mutations, right? Another round of reproduction and the mutations. That mutation will continue, right? And that's how, if the another generation, they will be generated the mutations which is like A and B, and both of these A and B mutations are not useful, then they are actually not going to survive. Whereas the favorable mutations may likely to survive. For example, in this case, you have first generated a single mutations in the first generation, then in the second generation again there will be mutations, so it has generated the third generation, then third generation again got mutation, and that's how you see the population of this particular mutant, the mutant 2, is now overtaken the whole populations. And that is what the Hingo de Vries has proved by doing the multiple experiments. And because it was very well defined based on the experiments, people will come up with the different types of evidences to prove that. The evidences to prove the Hingo de Vries theory was as the experiment performed by the de Vries was reproduced by the several other scientists, and they came to the similar conclusion. So that was the first thing which was positive for the Hingo de Vries, the mutation theory. The mutations found spontaneously in nature, and these sudden appearance of mutation variation has strengthened the mutation theory. These mutations found in nature are as follows. For example, the Ancon sheep was produced by an ordinary sheep in a single step in 1891. The mutated sheep was short height, and it was useful for farmers as they could not be able to jump from the low stone fences. Then we have the hornless or the polled hornbred cattle was produced in a single step in 1899 from the normal parents, which means with a single mutations you can be able to develop a particular different species. The hairless cattle, dog and mice were produced from the normal parents in a single step. Then we have the different types of experiments in the plants, like Ornithorina lamincana has 14 chromosomes, but the mutations were having only in this kind of 30 chromosomes. Then we have mutations are genetically linked and the inheritable. So what we could count is that the mutations what are being produced in these animals are genetically linked and the inheritable. And the single large mutations can produce new species in plant, for example, the delicious apple. So what people have found is that there is a single mutation and that is actually producing the new species. But despite these experimental evidences and a foolproof theory, the people are coming up with the objections. So there are evidences against the theory. There are evidences against the mutation theory proposed by the Hingo Dubris. What are the objections? The mutations are of the rare occurrence, and it is difficult to assume that all the animals or the plant species could appear solely by the mutation. So mutation is a very rare phenomenon. It could happen and it could be inducing factors, but it could not be explained that the only the mutation is the responsible factor for the development of so many species. The relationship between the flower and the insect, such as the length of the proboscis in insect and the position of nectaris in flower, cannot be explained by the mutation theory. So the relationship between the two intersecting species, like the species which are helping to each other, cannot be explained by the mutation theory. How insect is being evolved in such a way that it is actually having a well defined or suited proboscis, so that it can be able to take up the nutrition from the flower, and at the same time it also can be able to help the plant to go for the pollinations. The mutations are recessive, whereas it is generally with the dominant mutation that bring out the evolutions. So there are mutations which are recessive, there are mutations which are dominant. So the Hingo Dubris could not be able to explain these particular type of aspects, and that's how the mechanism of evolution or the theory of the mutation theory was also could not be able to explain each and every phenomena what is happening. So what we have discussed about the different types of theories. We started with the Lamarck's theory, and then we have also discussed about the theory of natural selection and as well as the Hingo Dubris theories of mutation theory. Every theory has some positives and some negatives, and at the end what you could see is there is a probably all the theories were not complete and all the theories were not conclusive to explain the how the evolution could have happened. But if you summarize them and you could try to conclude something, you will understand that the Hingo has done is said is that there could be a generation of mutations, right? There could be a mutation generation, and in that the environmental factor could have been playing a crucial role, because you know that the solar radiation and as well as the UV radiation could have actually made the mutations, and these mutations could be helpful for the organism or could be lethal for the organisms, and that's how it is making the variation within the species. So you see, if you mix the theory of Darwin's theory and if you mix the Hingo Dubris theory, you could be able to understand the full pictures. But as I said, none of these theories were conclusive in terms of explaining the mechanism of evolution. So with this, I would like to conclude my lecture here. Thank you.